Ram.
Hare Hare.
Today we're hearing from chapter 2, verse number 41 of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it says, contents of the Gita summarized. So the verse is text 41. Vyavasayatmaka Buddhir, Ekaha Kuranandana, Bahusaka Hinantascha, Buddhayo Vyavasayanam. Those who are in this path, on this path, are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one, O beloved child of the Kurus. The intelligence of those who are irresolute is many branched. I like this verse very much. I'll explain why in a few minutes. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. A strong faith that by Krishna consciousness one will be elevated to the highest perfection of life is called Vyasayatmaka intelligence. The Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 22.62 states, Shraddha Sabde Vishwasakaye Surhita Nishchaya Krishna Bhakti Kaila Sarva Karma Kritahaya. Faith means unflinching trust in something sublime. When one is engaged in the duties of Krishna consciousness, he need not act in relationship to the material world with obligations to family traditions, humanity, or nationality. I want to stop right there before everyone misunderstands what was just said. When it says that when one is engaged in the duties of Krishna consciousness, he need not act in relationship to the material world with obligations to family traditions. Okay, so it's not rejecting family, but it's rejecting to family traditions. No, what does that mean? Well, like in my family, every Sunday we would eat chicken, and we would also have a little bit of whiskey. If there were, my father would give me, so I could grow up to be a real man. So that's some kind of a family tradition. That's what it's saying, that there are certain family traditions that we should not be held to once we become Krishna conscious. All right? And they're all strange type of family traditions in the world. That's why it says, when one is engaged in the duties of Krishna consciousness, he need not act in relationship to the material world with obligations to family traditions. It doesn't mean with obligations to family. It says obligations to family traditions. So there can be a whole bunch of different family traditions. And like I said, in my family, every Sunday we had to have chicken, but that's not something that we have to adhere to. That's a family tradition. It's not something that is Krishna conscious. Okay, so faith means unflinching truth and something sublime. When one is engaged in the duties of Krishna consciousness, he need not act in relationship to the material world with obligations to family traditions, humanity, or nationality. Fruitive activities are the engagement of one's reactions from past good or bad deeds. When one is awake in Krishna consciousness, he need no longer endeavor for good results in his activity. When one is situated in Krishna consciousness, all activities are on the absolute plane, for they are no longer subject to dualities like good and bad. The highest perfection in Krishna consciousness is renunciation of the material conception of life. This state is automatically achieved by progressive Krishna consciousness. The resolute purpose of a person in Krishna consciousness is based on knowledge. Vasudeva Sarvamiti, Samahatma Sudurlabha. A person in Krishna consciousness is the rare good soul who knows perfectly that Vasudeva, or Krishna, is the root of all manifested causes. And by watering the root of a tree, one automatically distributes water to the leaves and branches. So, by acting in Krishna consciousness, one can render the highest service to everyone, namely self, family, society, country, humanity, etc. If Krishna is satisfied by one's actions, then everyone will be satisfied. Service in Krishna consciousness is, however, best practiced under the able guidance of a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Krishna, who knows the nature of the student and who can guide him to act in Krishna consciousness. As such, to be well versed in Krishna consciousness, one has to act firmly and obey the representative of Krishna, and one should accept the instruction of the bona fide spiritual master as one's mission in life. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura instructs us in his famous prayers for the spiritual master as follows. And it says, Yasya Prasad Bhagavat Prasado, Yasya Prasadan Nagatir Kutopi, Dayam Sutram Tasya Yasas Prisanyam Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam. By satisfaction of the spiritual master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes satisfied. And by not satisfying the spiritual master, there is no chance of being promoted to the plane of Krishna consciousness. I should therefore meditate and pray for his mercy 3 times a day and offer my respectful obeisances unto him, my spiritual master. The whole process, however, depends on perfect knowledge of the soul beyond the conception of the body, not theoretical, but practical, when there is no longer a chance for sense gratification, manifested in fruitive activities. One who is not firmly fixed in mind is diverted by various types of fruitive acts. Well, fruitive acts. What's a fruitive act? It's when we forget Krishna and act for our own sense gratification. That's a fruitive act. And most people act like that. There's what you call prioritizing one's life. So people prioritize things different. Like some people say, well, first thing is family. You see a lot of politicians say, oh, first thing in my life is family. Of course, they were caught cheating on their wife. They were caught, engaging in money laundering, this or that. And once they're caught, they say, well, the most thing in my life is family. But that prioritization is false, actually. The first thing in everybody's life should be Krishna, the Supreme Personality. And the second thing should be caring for devotees. And the third thing should be family. So here we have a prioritization as a devotee looks at it. First thing is pleasing the Lord. Second thing is taking care, huh?
Devotees.
Yeah, taking care of devotees. And third thing is family. Well, most people go, wait a minute, no, that's not the way we go. First thing is family, then the second thing is the extended family, and the third thing is race, and like that. So there's different ways of prioritizing one's life. But a devotee has a different prioritization. Number one is Krishna, pleasing Krishna, the Supreme Personality. Two is taking care of devotees and respecting devotees, and especially spiritual master. And the third thing is taking care of family. And the fourth thing is so forth and so forth, so on. So everybody has a different way of prioritizing their life. And if we begin by prioritizing Krishna, then everything will be, let's say, will function in a very nice way. But if we begin by prioritizing family or friends or this thing or that thing, like you prioritize your dog or your cat or something like that, then it's not going to work very well. Okay, so the ability to prioritize things correctly is very important. Now look up the 5 elements of every action. 5 elements of every action.
Yeah, that's in the 18th chapter. Eighteen 14.
Right. Ahisthanam tata karta karanam cha pritak vidam vividascha pritak chesta daivam chaivatra panchamam. The place of action, meaning the body, the performer, the various senses, the many different kinds of endeavor, and ultimately the supreme super soul. These are the 5 factors of action. Another way of saying it is the place, meaning the situation or the body, 2, the performer, the doer, and the type of work that's going to be done. And 3, senses, 4, different endeavors, and 5, the super soul. So we have to take these 5 points into consideration for any action that we're going to perform. And the 5th point is the super soul. In other words, we have to be very careful before we act. And this is the 18th chapter, 14th verse. And it said, Ahistam tatha karta karanam cha pritakvidam vividas cha pritakyasta daivam chaiva cha panchamam. The place of action in the body, the performer, it's the person. The various senses, that's the senses of the person. The many different kinds of endeavor. And ultimately the super soul. These are the 5 factors of every action. In other words, before we act, if we're enlightened, we take into consideration these 5 factors. Most people take into consideration 2 or 3, maybe 4 factors. They don't always take into consideration Krishna, the Supreme Person. But that's why people make a lot of mistakes in life. So let's read the purport to this. This is very, very important. These are the 5 factors for every action. The word ahistanam refers to the body. The soul within the body is acting to bring about the results of activity and is therefore known as karta, the doer. That the soul is the knower and the doer is stated in the Shruti, meaning the original scriptures that were spoken by Krishna. Esahi drasta shrasta, Prasna Upanishad 4.9. It is stated in the Shruti. Shruti means what was spoken originally by Krishna. It is also confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra by the verses Gno ta eva and Karta Sastrar Tavar Tavat. The instruments of action are the senses, and by the senses, the soul acts in various ways. For each and every action, there is a different endeavor, but all one's activities depend on the will of the super, who is seated within the heart as a friend. The Supreme Lord is the supreme cause. Under these circumstances, he who is acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of the super soul situated within the heart is naturally not bound by any activity. Those in complete Krishna consciousness are not ultimately responsible for their actions. Everything is dependent on the supreme will, the super soul, the supreme personality of God. Okay, so this is a very important verse. If we want to act responsibly, if we don't want to be responsible for what we do, then we ignore this and we'll get into a lot of trouble. But if we want to avoid all that unnecessary trouble due to ignorance, we should pay a lot of attention to this verse. In other words, it's saying there's 5 factors to every action. Most people take into account maybe 3 or 4 factors, and usually do not take into account the 5th factor. So what are the 5 factors? The place of action, that's the body. Second, the performer of the action, the living entity. 3, the various senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and so forth. The many different kinds of endeavor. And ultimately, the super soul. These are the 5 factors of action. So let's have an example here. Let's say you want to go, what do you call that? Skiing. You go skiing? No, don't go skiing. Very dangerous. A lot of people die by skiing. Yeah, so you go up, a mountain, and you have these skis, and you have these 2 sticks or something. What do you call those things? 2 of them.
No. Skiing rods, I think.
It helps you to control your skiing. Anyway, you're going up a mountain. That right there is potentially dangerous.
Poles.
Huh? Poles. What kind of poles?
So there are 2 poles.
Ski poles.
Ski poles. There is ski poles.
Ski poles.
The
Yeah.
skis, which you put into feet.
Yeah.
The big ones are the skis, and these are the poles.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and you go down the mountain. It's extremely dangerous. A lot of people die every year skiing. Look that up. How many people die a year skiing? Because number one, already you're up high on the mountain. Number 2, when you start going down the mountain, you can reach a high level of speed. And if you make a little mistake, you could run into a tree, you could I don't know, you could go over a cliff. There's so many things that can go wrong because you're on a mountain. What does it say?
46 people died.
In that winter time, 22.
With 37 of those being skiers.
Okay,
37 of them are good skiers.
Professional.
professional. Yeah, see
The
that?
rest of them are novice.
What?
Novice.
Like
Beginner.
beginners.
So how many?
46 people.
46 in the United States. Yeah, that's not counting the whole world.
It's National Ski Areas Association
Right.
statistics.
Yeah. Yeah, skiing is a very dangerous thing because mostly the people that die are novices. You know, it's just like the first time or second time or third time they're doing it, and then they get a little bit of you know, they think, oh, now I know what to do. You know,
Skiers.
no, I know, but
But they're not probably exceptional. They're still in that, maybe not the first time, in the first 5 times, 10 times. They feel like they got it and then they start getting into the next one.
it's very dangerous skiing. Don't do it. It's very easy to get hurt when you ski.
Getting hurt is very
If you, that's if you don't die. So does it tell you how many people get injured by skiing?
Oh, that probably is a lot. That's like everybody.
600,000.
A year. In the
Each
world
year.
or in the United States?
in the United States.
That's a lot.
600,000 people are injured while skiing each year.
Well, that's more than the car accidents, I think. How many car accidents are there?
Which is 2 to 3 injuries per 1,000 skiers,
Wow.
skier days.
Now, how many people get injured by driving a car?
A lot more.
More?
3,700 people die every day in road accidents worldwide.
3 times. Oh, okay. We'll have.
But every day, so times 360.
In the United States.
Hmm.
5.2 million people in the United States were medically consulted for injuries in motor vehicle crashes in 2020.
500.
5.2 million.
5.2 million.
Car
Well,
injuries.
driving a car is more dangerous than skiing.
Skiing is 600,000.
But most likely because car probably will have multiple passengers. So one person driving, but then 3-4 people can get hurt,
Wow.
or multiple other cars also. Whereas skiing is mostly individual.
I'm gonna
So
do a
in-
horse and buggy. How many people get injured by a horse and buggy?
Back in the days, probably more, but
That was much less. You could get hurt also with horse and buggy.
but that kind of misery can come from any activity, right? I mean, percentage does vary, but
Well, I mean, driving a car is always dangerous. In any situation, it's always dangerous. Very easy to make mistakes driving cars. Maybe you don't make the mistake, but somebody else can make the mistake and injure you.
Yeah,
Like Don, yeah. You see, and there's a lot of accidents every year in the United States. They always have to be very, very careful. Not only you have to be careful, you have to watch other people also. You know, they go through red lights, and sometimes people make mistakes. You know, they didn't mean to go through a red light, but you know, they're not paying attention or something. They go through a red light, and you know, they can die very easily. And then there's there are people that die every year also because they get run over by a train. You know, because you have a lot of places where you sometimes, well, you have these places where the people that live where the train to stop the people from crossing the train tracks.
rail.
to let the train go by. But sometimes they make mistakes. And then people die. So many ways of making mistakes, it's unbelievable. Okay. So, according to the Vedanta Sutra, there are 5 causes for the accomplishment of all action. Now learn of these from me. So, the question may be raised that since this is verse 13, the question may be raised that, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm reading from the 18th chapter because we started discussing in yeah. So just to give a little more context about this point. According to Vedanta, there are 5 causes for the accomplishment of all action. Now learn of these from me. This is the 18th chapter, verse 13. A question may be raised that since any activity performed must have some reaction, how is it that the person in Krishna consciousness does not suffer or enjoy the reactions of work? The Lord is citing Vedanta philosophy to show how this is possible. He says that there are 5 causes for all activities. And for success in all activity, one should consider these 5 causes. Sankhya means the stalk of knowledge, and Vedanta is the final stalk of knowledge accepted by all leading acharyas. Even Sankara accepts Vedanta Sutra as such. Therefore, such authority should be consulted. The ultimate control is invested in the supersoul, and it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarvasya Chaham Hridi Sannivrista. He is engaging everyone in certain activities by reminding him of his past actions and Krishna consciousness and Krishna conscious acts done under his, meaning Krishna's direction, from within, yield no reaction either in this life or in the life after death. Now, what are these 5 factors of every action? They are 1, the place of action, meaning the body. 2, the performer of the action.
The soul.
3, the various senses. 4, many different kinds of endeavor. And 5, ultimately, the supersoul. These are the 5 factors of action. Now, the purport says the word ahistanam refers to the body. The soul within the body is acting to bring about the results of activity and is therefore known as karta, the doer. That the soul is the knower and the doer is stated in the Shruti, in the Vedic scripture. Esahi drasta strasta, Prasna Upanishad 4.9. It is also confirmed in Vedanta Sutra by the verse Vinota Eva 2.3.18 and Karta Sastrar Tavartavat 2.3.33. The instruments of action are the senses, and by the senses, the soul acts in various ways. For each and every action, there is a different endeavor, but all one's activities depend on the will of the supersoul, who is seated within the heart as a friend. The Supreme Lord is the super core. Under these circumstances, he who is acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of the supersoul, situated within the heart, is naturally not bound by any activity. Those in complete Krishna consciousness are not ultimately responsible for their acts. Everything is dependent on the supreme will, the supersoul, the supreme personality of God. Okay, let's break this down a little bit. this is explaining the factors of an action. So let's put it like this. Let's say someone becomes 16 years old, right away, they want to drive. Okay. So they go to driving school, take some lessons. Eventually, they get their license, and now they're driving, and they have a car. So there are different factors of every action, and that we have to take into account. There's the place of the action, meaning the body. There's the performer. There's the various senses, the many different kinds of endeavor, and ultimately the super soul. These are the 5 factors of action. So, what usually happens is that when, let's say, a teenager gets his first car, and usually the parents, they try and give, a nice car. Let's say a brand new BMW. That's not everybody, because that's an expensive car. But there are parents that will do that. So I think I told you before, Dr. Sodi gave a brand new car to his son, a very fast car. And after 2 months, I think it was 2 months, he was dead. He just started speeding and he got killed. So it's very, it's not a good thing to give such a powerful instrument to a teenager, because teenagers don't really understand, what they'll do is they go joyriding. So they invite all their friends to get into their nice new car that daddy and mommy bought for them. And now they start speeding all over the place. That's the most dangerous thing in the world. Because, it's very easy to make a mistake with a car, especially if you start speeding. And it's very easy to die. Most accidents are because people are speeding. So, to become responsible, you have to be trained. You can't hand the keys to a powerful car like a BMW or whatever, and expect the boy or the girl to know, about car safety. Because they're powerful cars. They can go from, 0 to 80 in what? 1 minute. Yeah, a lot of these powerful cars can do it in 1 minute. So, and then when you have a car like that, you like to test it and see if it's a fact.
Not 1 minute, Maharaj.
Huh?
1 minute is
4.2, 3 seconds something. 3 seconds to 4 seconds. The really fast cars,
Yeah.
they go in like 3 to 4 seconds from 0 to 60.
Seconds.
Yeah, the race cars
Sec-
are on those like Ferrari and all those like zoom. They do within
Like
seconds.
like in under 3 seconds they'll go.
Cars are dangerous.
Yep.
Very dangerous. So you give a 16-year-old boy a car like that, that's like, telling them to walk on the edge of a mountain, You could easily have an accident. And you easily lose control of the car. Very easy. Okay. So in this purport, it says the instruments of action are the senses. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, see. And by the senses, the soul acts in various ways. For each and every action, there is a different endeavor, but all one's activities depend on the will of the supersoul, who is seated within the heart as a friend. Supreme Lord is the super cause. Under these circumstances, he who is acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of the super soul situated within the heart is naturally not bound by any activity. Those in complete Krishna consciousness are not ultimately responsible for their actions. Everything is dependent on the supreme will, the super soul, the supreme personality of God. Well, you wouldn't be able to give this argument to a judge. He said, well, look, Judge, in my religion, it says that those in complete Krishna consciousness are not ultimately responsible for their actions.
Hmm.
The judge said, are you trying to tell me that when you strangled your cat, you were not responsible for your action, or when you strangled your sister, you were not responsible for your, it doesn't work like that. So if you're in complete Krishna consciousness, you don't go around strangling your sister or strangling your cat or anything like that. So those are not, let's say, protected by this principle. And the other principle is, you can't say, well, Judge, I heard a voice that said I should kill my mother, and that's why I did it. So I'm not really responsible. Well, who's responsible? Well, it's the voice that I heard. That's a bunch of nonsense. Sometimes people say, I heard this voice, that's why I did it. So it says, under these circumstances, he who is acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of the super soul situated within the heart is naturally not bound by any activity. Well, you have to think about this. Those in complete Krishna consciousness are not ultimately responsible for their actions. Everything is dependent on the supreme will, the super soul, the supreme personality of God. Now, see, statement like that can be easily misconstrued. And people of low intelligence would misconstrue it or misunderstand it and think that they can get away with anything. You can't. The doer, or the karta means the doer, is always going to be responsible, because you make a decision, and it's first, okay, there's 3 steps before you act. First, you see something that's attractive. 2, you begin to think how nice it would be if you could relate to that thing. And then 3, you become determined that without that thing, you'll never be happy. And then 4, you act.
The thinking, feeling, willing.
Yeah,
That's what you said.
Yeah, so those are the 3 psychological steps before every action: thinking, feeling. So everything depends on how you see things. If you like, you can look at a person and just see their body and their dress and the type of car they have and their clothes and make judgments based on them. Or you can understand that within the clothes there's a body, and within the body there's a heart, and within the heart is the living entity, and also in the heart is Krishna. That's another way of seeing the person. So everything depends on how we see things. So if we don't have any education, we just see the body, we make many mistakes in life. But if we're able to see through knowledge that there's the gross body, and then there's the subtle body, and then there is the living entity, and there's also the super soul. And that's another way of looking at things. Or some people just see the body and the subtle body and the person, but they don't see the soul, the super soul. So everything depends on how we see things. So if we're educated by coming to class, then you learn to see things correct. But if you're not educated, you can make many, many mistakes in life. Eventually, even that could lead to serious consequences. Just like, sometimes someone commits a murder and they say, Judge, I'm not responsible. Judge, it says, what do you declare yourself as? You said, not guilty. I said, really? But you strangled someone to death. But anyway, I'm not guilty, Judge, by the fact that I was temporarily insane. A lot of people who try and use that.
Insanity
Yeah.
plea. Insanity plea.
They have to prove that you actually were insane. But even though that won't, well, once you look at that, let's look up the plea of insanity.
Yeah, insanity.
Yeah. A lot of people use that as their reason for committing a crime. Usually it doesn't work, but sometimes it may work.
Just time check also, Maharaj. Like I'll read this one. So
Plea
since
of insanity.
the insanity plea, also known as insanity defense, is a legal defense that a defendant can use in a criminal trial to argue that they should not be held criminally responsible for their actions due to a severe mental illness at the time of the offense. So here are the key points about the insanity plea. Legal standards. Different jurisdictions use different standards to determine insanity. There's some different rules also and testing. So McKnighton rule, the defendant did not understand the nature of the act, did not know it was wrong due to the mental disease or defect. Irresistible impulse test, the defendant could not control their actions or conform their conduct to the law due to mental illness. Durham's law, the defendant's unlawful act was a product of mental disease or defect. Model penal code, the defendant lacks substantial capacity to appreciate the criminality of their conduct or to conform their conduct to the requirements of the law due to mental illness. Basically, that they were not in control when this act happened. Burden of proof. The burden of proof can vary. In some jurisdictions, the defendant must prove insanity by preponderance of the evidence, while in others, the prosecution must prove the defendant was sane before beyond a reasonable doubt. So the outcome, if the defendant is not found guilty by reason of insanity, they're typically committed to a mental health facility for treatment rather than being sent to prison. So
It depends on
the judge,
severity of the
yeah,
crime.
crime also.
A lot of people use the excuse of temporary insanity.
It's about 7:45.
Yeah. All right, we'll stop right there. Any questions?
Go ahead, bro.
So, the beginning of this purport.
You want to
was-
speak a little louder?
Yeah. So, beginning of this was 2.41. The purport, it is mentioned the duties of Krishna consciousness. So, what is that means?
The
Would you define the
duties
duties
Krishna
of
consciousness.
Krishna consciousness?
The duties of Krishna consciousness.
So that may be different for different
People.
ashramas, different people, and then so it's just not so for the soldiers that may be different. Krishna consciousness. How do we define the soldier is acting as a what kind of duties in Krishna consciousness will be? I mean, the kind of varnas. So different varnas have different duties. So all those are duties in Krishna consciousness.
Okay, now, the duty in Krishna consciousness is to follow the regulative principles of Krishna consciousness.
Mm.
Let's see, the duty of, let's say, a non-devotee, well, they might not be aware of all rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. Okay. But in Krishna consciousness, we have a rigorous, let's say, understanding of what our duty is. First of all, no meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, no intoxication. Then, to go on further, we should have a bona fide spiritual ministry. We should take the vows of initiation, keep those and follow those vows. So not everybody has all these, what you would call obligations. When you get initiated, you get obligation, you get more obligations than a normal person. So it's by breaking those obligations or vows that you get into trouble. So there's two levels of responsibility. One is called social responsibility, and the other is called spiritual responsibility. And the social responsibility, it's let's say, it's continually changing. Like before, abortion was not allowed. Now abortion is allowed. But the spiritual responsibility is never changing. It's always the same. Mundane responsibility can change over time, but spiritual responsibility is eternal. And so therefore, there are two sets, let's say there's two sets of responsibility. One is social responsibility due to living in a particular country that has their own laws. And the second set of responsibility, a responsibility to God. And it has its own set of laws. And somehow or other, you cannot violate, you cannot say, well, I only follow this one, not the other one. You have to follow both. So we're following both, where it says no meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex. Well, wait a minute. Most people are breaking those principles, right? But they're not considered breaking the law. But for us, it's breaking this second set of principles that we follow. And then you have another set of laws that say, you can't commit murder, you can't steal, you can't lie, and so forth. So there's different sets of rules and responsibilities. And sometimes you have several sets of them that you have to follow. And if you say, well, I only follow these responsibilities, I won't follow the other set of responsibilities, you get into trouble. Just like you say, well, look, I'm born in England, we always drive on the left side. Yeah, but the policeman has stopped. He said, yeah, but you're in the United States. So I don't care. What do you mean you don't care? There's a different set of laws here. We drive on the right-hand side of the United States. You can't use that, I don't care, or well, in England, we drive on the left-hand side. It doesn't work. So we have to adapt to mundane laws, and we have to adapt also to spiritual laws. And not everybody does that. So like, for example, it used to be, against the law to have an abortion. Now it's legal. But according to Krishna consciousness, it's not. It's a very sinful thing to do. But people say, but it's legal. So what if it's legal? I mean,
that's also changing now.
huh?
That's also changing in the recent past.
Which way? Going back to it's
Back to where the abortion is. Yeah.
I have seen
I mean, at least the Supreme Court is earlier it was now it's each state can decide probably.
Yeah.
Like some
I
states.
see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Earlier it
the
was.
Christians know this, it's murder. Yeah, and all the nonsense people, they think, oh, it's necessary. And all they'll always say, well, what happens if someone gets raped? And then they say, well, okay, we'll make an exception for that. Actually, they should not make an exception for that. They should permit that when a child is born, they can give the child for adoption.
Hmm.
Because it is murder. If you're going to kill the fetus, it is murder. Anyway, there's different ways of looking at these things, but everyone likes to say all the so-called feminists and people like that. They always try and find an extreme case to win the argument. So now extreme cases are rare, but immediately a false arguer will try and win an argument by giving an extreme case. That might only happen maybe once in 1,000. But because of that, they debunk the validity of a good law on the basis of things that might happen only once in 1,000 or once in 10,000. That's the way people win arguments. They immediately try and bring up an extreme case of something. Just like, if you're talking about abortion, like, well, abortion was not allowed. They were still happening, but it was not allowed. And then they made it legal. So they abort every year now legally. Not quite a million. That's just only in the United States, not quite a million kids. Or I think 1 million. Or somewhere around that. And it's legal. So that is considered murder according to Krishna consciousness. And it used to be considered murder. So, but if the baby comes out of the womb and then you kill it, it's considered murder. If the baby is still in the womb or just, not completely out of the womb, then it's not considered murder. It's very interesting. If it's completely out of the womb, it's considered murder. If it's not completely out of the womb, it's not considered murder.
There's so many things, Maharaj, like that. So our body is like that. Everything inside, everything is good. Everything comes out, everything is bad. Everything comes out is bad.
Everything that comes out.
Coming from the nose is bad. From your all the places where it comes out, they're bad. Until it's in the body, everything is good. Nobody has any problem. But the moment it comes out of our body, everything is bad.
Okay, I have to think about that a little bit. Not everything.
At least
Babies,
I don't think.
some babies come.
When baby comes
No,
out,
not
the
baby.
head,
I mean, babies with an exception. I'm talking about the.
Babies
Uh,
also.
that's why I said you have to think about it. Can't make
General statement.
But
Well, I mean, even good words come out, like spiritual words. Those also come out
what
through
is
the
the
mouth.
physical part? I'm talking about these things.
You're
Like
talking about stool and urine.
mucus, urine, your
Wax.
respiration, wax, eyes from. I mean, whatever is the parts, whatever is coming out of it, it's body is throwing maybe something the bad part,
Well,
whatever.
maybe we should kill everybody. That way nothing else comes out. We'll have to have a sewer or anything. That one big cemetery.
No, but we carry that all the old, like we don't have a problem, but when that comes out, then Anyway,
Okay,
alright, so there is
Hari
another
Bol.
question, Maharaj, but you can- yes.
we can,
So,
yeah, we can learn this.
you also
Hare Krishna.
discussed